working for a company and a job is one thing, but using your time, treasure, talents to help someone else, whether it's an NGO or a group of people who have kind of an off-ball request to move X amount of what from A to B, if you have those resources and those connections and you can facilitate that, there's no monetary, recoup to that, but you're part of a larger community.
From the Grit Institute, this is the Grit Factor podcast. And I'm Shannon Huffman Polson, former Apache helicopter pilot, speaker, and author of The Grit Factor, Courage, Resilience, and Leadership in the most male-dominated organization in the world. I'm also the founder of the Grit Institute, where I help purpose-driven leaders like you build grit and resilience and connect with purpose so that you can navigate transitions, overcome challenges, and lead with impact in your work for a better world. I first met Tom Cappelletti while researching The Grit Factor. He reached out on LinkedIn not to talk about himself, but to make sure I didn't miss the story of a senior leader he deeply respected. That's Tom in a nutshell. Someone who connects, elevates others, and always looks for ways to serve. Tom spent 25 years in the U.S. Air Force, and today he flies for Alaska Airlines and consults in the cybersecurity space. But when you talk to Tom, he doesn't dwell on titles or his own accomplishments or career. He's most interested in what really matters, in life and in work. You could call Tom purpose-built. In this conversation, we talk about character, purpose, and the powerful legacy project he's now leading to honor a classmate whose life of service continues to inspire. Tom, welcome to the Grit Factor. Let's start a little bit earlier on your journey and talk about how it is that you got into the Air Force in the first place. What drew you to that and what brought you into aviation?
Well, the aviation side's the easier part. I always wanted to be a pilot. I took a ride as a passenger on a 747 from Boston to San Francisco, probably around age 8 or 9 or 10. Similar to, a little younger than your boys are, but got a set of pilot wings from the captain. They were plastic, but they had a metal pin. And, once you get kerosene in your veins, you never get it out. That was my inspiration, I guess. Whether I was gravitated to this or I was meant to do this, that's an unknown. We'll know at the end of the journey. But that's what piqued my interest, and I still have those wings in my wing collection.
You do.
Yeah,
oh, that's fantastic.
I don't throw stuff away, but that set means a lot to me. And I have all my wings, including my Air Force pilot wings and airline wings, that in 4 years and 9 months and a couple days, won't they'll be part of a collection, and but also touchstones of previous eras. So that was kind of my motivation to get into aviation. The Air Force kind of came later. My dad's a veteran, but never really talked about it much on the Army side, Transportation Corps officer in Germany. But, there was always that example of, and growing up in New England, being exposed to the history of this nation, walking the Freedom Trail as every elementary school kid in Boston would back in the 70s and 80s, and seeing, the history before you. Learning about the John Hancock, Sam Adams, Joseph Warrens of the world, seeing the Constitution, the oldest commissioned ship in the Navy. She still sits in the Charleston Navy Yard. And we were fortunate to, be part of the journey a couple of years ago with the John Connors Memorial Fund, which we'll talk about later. But, so I think surrounded by the history, I wanted to pay for college. Altruistic reasons, but also, financial reasons. And so that provided a way for me to get my engineering degree at Worcester Polytech and with an Air Force ROTC scholarship. And then, kind of combine that with my desire to fly airplanes. And, that journey took a little longer than usual because I started out as a program manager in the Air Force, as a test program manager. So, it took me as opposed to some of my peers who went straight into pilot training, classmates of mine from WPI, it took me a couple more years and a different way of reaching that goal, but, able to kind of self-actualize that goal nonetheless.
Right, right. Which is a helpful reminder that sometimes the path isn't straight and that's okay. I think there's a lot of young people that worry about that they've gotten off track or that they're just going to be tracked in one direction and they're never going to be able to change it. And that's a helpful reminder that those paths do change and they change often.
They change a lot more than they used to. I mean, my dad worked for the same company for 36 years. So people of his generation had a different experience than people of my generation. You're a little bit younger than I am, but I'm sure that paradigm changes over the generations. Our kids will see a lot different workplace, more flexibility, a lot more adaptability, certainly more family friendly, meaning as far as a work life balance. And that's kind of an important takeaway too. You got to stop and smell the roses once in a while or read a book.
I like
So,
that. Read a book. That's good. We've got to keep talking about that. People are doing a lot less of that lately.
geez, and you with your library project in Washington State and my interest in reading, I mean, really came from my mom and dad, and they still are in their 80s and they still read. And
Wonderful.
and that was a gift that was given to me, but not, I guess, by osmosis. And, certainly, that's something I enjoy, but I still, I still like the tactile thing,
I love it, Tom. Well played.
No, but
That's good.
it's reading digitally just doesn't, I don't comprehend as much. The takeaways, I like to underline stuff or star pages that, are specifically important to me.
I do as well. They actually have, all the studies are pretty clear on this as well, that we don't, it's fine to read digitally if you like it or if it's convenient for travel, but at the end of the day, we don't retain as well. We don't really bring it into ourselves as much. And so, yeah, I'm with you on the physical books for sure.
Well, I just think everybody learns differently, and I learned by, reading, seeing, making notes. The whole statue project thing, we found our sculptor because I made a note about a sculptor I saw a picture of well before, group and I embarked upon this project, and came back to that note. And 3 or 4 years later, but and I brought along some of my other friends, not just your book, but a great book for anybody I think would recommend is Lessons from the Admiral from Mark Fava. And it's not a product endorsement. I enjoyed reading it, and even I learned things. I was an exec for a colonel a long time ago for a short period of time in my formative years, but seeing it through Mark's eyes, he and I are about the same age. Him on the Navy side of the house, me on the Air Force side of the house. But his experience as a loop, as an admiral's aide in the late 80s, I think was part of his formative education and development. So he's now sharing, and that's a great book for anybody, any age, but I think specifically, I want to say under 40, people just starting out in their professional career, civilian or military, coming out of whatever institution, public, private, trade school, tech school, doesn't matter, high school. I think that, that might be, other than Admiral McRaven's book, Make Your Bed, I think Lessons from the Admiral might be a great high school graduation present for somebody thinking about service, whatever service means to them. You and I have touched on this before. Service doesn't just mean serving your country, although it could be serving your community, as in the case of building a library, could be serving your alma mater as an alumni admissions counselor, could be service takes many elements, and this country is built on service. John Kennedy said in 1961, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
And I wish we would ask that more. I think people need to ask that more. I hear a lot less of that. And I love that through your entire career, it sounds to me like this has been a focus for you. And it certainly is where you're coming around to now. this concept of service?
Kind of vicariously. I don't think I set out to, serve. I'm very proud of my service in the Air Force and wearing a uniform and upholding and protecting the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. But that never was a purpose. I think I'm kind of an accidental tourist to some of it. But now with the vantage point of a few years, I think it reinforces maybe some of the lessons I saw in my parents, in the community I grew up in, the church I belonged to, the high school I went to, WPI, what I saw as an undergrad, just kind of, I guess, reinforced those lessons that built a good foundation for me to add a couple levels to it.
Well, that's important. And your service has gone from the Air Force to being an airline captain to working in cybersecurity and actually now also having led humanitarian efforts and other nonprofit efforts. So this service thing sounds like it is building in you and your understanding and how it is that you're working in the world.
Well, working for a company and a job is one thing, but, using your time, treasure, talents to help someone else, whether it's an NGO or a group of people who have kind of an off-ball request to, move X amount of what from A to B. If you have those resources and those connections and you can facilitate that, there's no monetary, recoup to that, but, you're part of a larger community.
You're extraordinarily well connected and extraordinarily, I would say, action oriented. So maybe let's just get into one of these, because one of the pieces that I understood about you first, besides that you were a connector because you reached out and made a connection for me, and you've done that multiple times since then, is that you were then starting to work on the issue of an airlift of medical supplies to Ukraine. And it's a pretty extraordinary story. So I'd love it if you would share that. I know we're jumping over huge decades of your career, but I feel like in many ways, maybe it's led you to the ability and the interest and the willingness to do something like this.
Well, no, I mean, nobody wants to hear about my career, and that's not what we're talking about. I mean, my first way we met was when I introduced you to Don Dunlop for your book, The Grit Factor. Don was my T-38 instructor many years ago. I'm a huge fan of hers as a person, as an aviator, as an officer. So, that's how we met. But then, many years later, I told you the story a little bit. A peer of mine vicariously reached out to me and said, "Hey, I've got a group of Ukrainian. This is 2022, early 2022." A group of Ukrainian medical students, law students, graduates, MBAs in the Bay Area, who have raised a lot of money, purchased a lot of medical gear, and they want to move it to Ukraine, but really don't have the connectivity to do that. Do you think you might be able to help? To which I said, okay. And I kind of reached out to a couple people in my network, and they said, no, you need to talk to this guy. We'll just call him Mike in Atlanta. And who does this for a living for a lot of NGOs, whether it's in Haiti or Bosnia or Europe or Ukraine or the Pacific or Indonesia, all over the world. He has the resources and, network to do that. So that's another good takeaway for your listeners is never throw a phone number, email, or a telephone number away, or an address, a physical address. Yours is easy to remember because it's the post office box of an airplane I used to fly, so it's all good.
That's right.
But back to the story at hand, Mike and I kind of collaborate. I said, I've got a group that has X amount of tons of medical equipment to move to Ukraine, and they're all Ukrainian. So, this is right after March of 2022. So he said, yeah, we can do that. That's going to be an interesting lift, no pun intended, because this is coming out of the backside of COVID, and a lot of the heavy airlift is tied up, and it's expensive to move a lot of, tonnage from the continental U.S. to Europe. But Mike has those connections, really went to work hard. I got to give kudos to him, and found an airplane that was available for a reasonable price, and would require a backhaul empty from Tallinn, Estonia, all the way to Seattle. So we set up. I worked with the Ukrainian folks in the Bay Area. I said, if you get the stuff to Seattle by X, we can get the airplane there by Y, and on Z, it can go to Europe. So legit, they trucked it all up from the Bay Area, and this became a much larger event. I mean, we had the Port Authority in Seattle helping, the Ukrainian consulate from the Bay Area attending. There was somebody from the mayor's office in Seattle. But literally, the items ended up in a warehouse at the airport in Seattle. The airplane showed up from Europe empty. It was loaded on a Friday morning, I think it was, and off it went nonstop to Poland, not to Warsaw, to an airport a little closer to Ukraine that we'd kind of picked because it made sense. Facilities, offload capability, because then the items had to get to Ukraine, which at the time was not an easy lift either. But Mike also had resources, so we were able to transship this group was able to transship all the medical gear off the airplane, transfer it to trucks, move across the Ukrainian border all the way to Kyiv.
My gosh, that's
and then
incredible.
The health ministry in Ukraine was able to move that much needed medical supplies to their civilian population and their army.
Wow. That's just an incredible, I mean, that's logistically absolutely extraordinary to just coordinate that kind of a thing as a civilian.
From a tabletop around the country as I fly around and do stuff.
I mean, it's fantastic. I mean, it really is. It's the kind of thing that people ask, well, what could I possibly do? What can I do as one person? And of course, you're not doing this as one person. You're recognizing the value of a network and the value of the people that you know and the power of that to be able to do something truly exceptional.
Well, as my friends would tell you, I like doing odd stuff. Good, odd stuff. Won't tell you the story about August of 2021 because that's just too personal, but this was a one-off, and it worked very well. And Mike and I have collaborated on other stuff. If you have the resources, you have the bandwidth, you have the contacts. Certainly, if people want to help, they can donate to the National Red Cross. Or there's multiple really good NGOs doing great work around the world, not just in Ukraine and sub-Saharan Africa. It doesn't matter. Even at home, with the floods in North Carolina, Mike and I collaborated on finding a couple of helicopters to move gear, up country in North Carolina after the floods, because a friend of mine was running an airlift and he needed rotary wing lift, and that's not my wheelhouse, but I knew where to go. But you can use your time or talents or treasure wherever you so choose, and that's, I think, is a big takeaway. You don't have to be grandiose. It doesn't have to be in the Seattle Times. It can be done quietly in the shadows where most everything else gets done.
Which is a good reminder as well. I think that people that are really doing the work are not looking for the headlines. They're looking for making an impact and knowing that that impact is significant and being happy about that.
And this is not a political statement, but my dad fought the Cold War as an Army officer. I partook of, a couple different adventures across a 25-year career, as you did, in defense of freedom. And today, more importantly, we need to stand for freedom around the world. We still are the shining beacon of hope, as the city on the hill, as Ronald Reagan said many years ago.
Absolutely true. And at the end of the day, you can't take that for granted, can you? You have to be willing to play your part in that.
You have to be willing to be not an innocent bystander to freedom and democracy, but an active participant.
Yes.
And that includes voting. That includes voting every 4 years or every other year for, the off-year cycle elections. It's a right, and it is a privilege, but it also is an enumerated right in the Constitution. So why not take advantage of it?
Yeah, exactly. I think I read somewhere that democracy is not a spectator sport. And that's a really important thing to remember, is that it is not a spectator sport, and it is more fragile than we want to admit, I think, sometimes.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. Well, so your current project, which is another project on behalf of somebody else, is a project that has taken a lot of your bandwidth for a number of years, is still ongoing, and is really about honoring a classmate of yours. Can you tell us about John Connors and tell us about this project?
Well, thanks for letting me wax eloquently, Shannon. We're 5 years into a 3-year project to honor my college classmate, and he was also commissioned the same day as I was, him in the Navy, me into the Air Force. Long time ago, 1987, Ballroom College of the Holy Cross, Worcester, Massachusetts, May 29th to be exact. So last time I saw John alive, 2.5 years later, he'd be killed in action in Panama as a member of SEAL Team 4.
The situation in Panama under General Noriega has reached a crisis. Democratic elections have been thwarted. American lives have been endangered. The integrity of the Panama Canal treaties is at risk. Last Friday, Noriega declared a state of war with the United States.
25 years ago, on December 20th, 1989, a force of about 26,000 American soldiers invaded Panama in Operation Just Cause.
On December 20th, 1989, in the initial invasion of Panama as a part of Operation Joint Cause, Navy SEAL Lieutenant Junior Grade John P. Connors led his team in a critical mission to secure the Paitilla airfield. Despite recovering from a serious infection, he had volunteered to join his unit. The SEAL teams were under intense enemy fire, and Connors advanced to suppress hostile positions, facilitating the evacuation of wounded teammates. His selfless actions were instrumental in the mission's success. Tragically, he was mortally wounded during the engagement. For his valor, he was posthumously awarded the Silver Star.
As I tell people, you never want to turn on the national news and see a picture of your college classmate. It's not a good thing. But a few years ago, a group of us came up with an idea to honor him in a tangible manner. He's got a rock in Arlington, Massachusetts. There's a conference room at Holy Cross. There's a building at Camp A.P. Hill in Virginia. But we wanted to do something a little more tangible, and we are well on the way to designing, casting, and dedicating a bronze statue of John in period SEAL gear on Lawson Common, Scituate, Massachusetts, which for your viewers and listeners is about 20 to 25 miles south of Boston, what's called along the South Shore of Massachusetts, along the water. Situate's a wonderful seaside community, very patriotic. Massachusetts, I don't know if there's something in the water, but between, from 1775 forward, I talk about John as the logical continuation of the Minutemen who grabbed a musket on April 19, 1775 on Lexington and Concord Green to oppose tyranny. Well, yes. John in his own way, served his country and made the ultimate sacrifice. So those of us who've had the good fortune to get this far, we really thought that we should do something to honor. So hopefully next year, I'm not going to pick a date because, we have some, miles to go before we sleep, as Robert Frost says. There'll be a magnificent statue called Elise, which is a Latin word chosen by the sculptor, our sculptor Chas Fagan, to others, with others, for others. Latin word in the dative case. But it encapsulates who John was. We tell the story of it as a scholar, an athlete, as a leader. And he was each of those three in his own way in his short 25 years. But the fact we had 200 people at the JFK Library a week and a half ago as a fundraiser for our statue project, but also to honor his legacy in a place honoring the legacy of the 35th President of the United States, also Lieutenant J.G. from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So we have a group of 12. We meet every other week online at 10:30 in the morning, East Coast time. And our fervent goal is next year at some point, when all the factors join, is to dedicate the statue to John and really all the veterans of the modern era warfare on the South Shore of Massachusetts. And so it's a learning tool. It's not just a static statue. It is a likeness of John. It is him. Chaz Fagan has done a wonderful job of bringing him to life in clay and soon bronze. But there'll be a QR code on a pedestal, and people can snap it with whatever device is current at the time, whether it's a phone, an iPad, or whatever comes after that, and learn about John's story and learn about his journey and his service to his alma mater, Boston College High, WPI, and then in the Navy SEAL teams.
And I think this is so important for so many reasons, beyond one of them being, of course, your willingness and eagerness to do things that are beyond yourself. And so I think that's a wonderful testament to that. So thank you for that. But the second thing is the way that you are approaching this as a way to remember your classmate and the things that he was doing, the way that he died. There's two pieces about. The first is the importance of good role models in that are exemplifying the values that we want to live, which is something that I'm hearing a lot of people talk about right now, the lack of, number one, role models, or the perceived lack of role models, but also the lack of adherence to and owning of values. So I'd love you to talk about the importance of role modeling, that kind of thing, and continuing those stories and sharing those stories of people where those values can continue on.
Well, I alluded to earlier, our first role models are our parents.
Yes.
And I'll surmise that you had two wonderful parents who were great role models for you, sadly
Absolutely.
gone far too early. But, in my case, my parents were wonderful role models for me. And the role models are there. And I will say that they're present. You have to find them, or they have to find you. I haven't, as we've told the story about John, I haven't met a person yet who didn't say he set the bar really high for the rest of us to meet. Whether it's my other classmate who happens to be the assistant commandant of the Marine Corps at this time, Chris Mahoney, or John's 90-year-old mom, who I saw a week and a half ago at the Kennedy Library. And, she's our North Star for this statue project. All 12 of us and more get up every day trying to figure out how we get this project done while she's alive so she can pull the drape off it. She's a Gold Star mother, and she's carried that, with her for 35 years with grace, with dignity, almost not wanting to be recognized as a Gold Star mother. But having met other Gold Star parents, family members, like Joe Kelly in Scituate, Massachusetts, whose son Michael was killed in Afghanistan. He's part of the Veterans Advisory Group and Veteran Advisory Committee in Scituate, and that group, together with the Select Board, which is a governing body in Scituate, just like every other little Massachusetts hamlet, they've been 110% supportive of this. And so, I think you would agree with me. I tell people we're building a community, and this community has a lot of pieces and parts to it, but they all fit together nicely in ways we have no idea. So those role models are there. You have to find them. They have to find you. Maybe you find each other. But for us, John continues to be 35 years later, something we all look towards as who we'd like to be.
Yes.
When we grow up.
I love that. What do you take from this work that you're doing about the importance of legacy and the importance of preserving the legacy of those who have served or those who have been those role models who might have been mostly even behind the scenes? What is our duty and our opportunity to do with that legacy?
Well, legacy, one, is what we make of it. Two, they say you die twice. Once when you actually die, and the second time when nobody says your name. So as John's SEAL teammate, Cagnoni, who uses that phrase also, will tell us, John is someone who should be remembered, is remembered, and will be remembered. So he's alive for all of us. So for those role models, I still remember my sixth grade teacher who lit an interest in speaking French, which I know you have an avocation for also.
Yeah.
And that continues to this day. Or my science teacher in eighth grade, who I'm still good friends with. I've always been interested in science and math, not very good at either, but interested in it. So that, will continue to be people in your life, even if you get to my age, who can be that role model for you to be that better person we all want to be.
Yes. Yes. And we all are grateful for those when they show up in our kids' lives, I know as well. And you have been incredibly generous, I know, with our family. And I know that this is just how you are with people, but in encouraging our younger son's interest in aviation and sending him those things that make him dream and connecting him with people that help him dream. And it is maybe helping the younger generation just have those dreams, right? And that they get the chance to live into.
Well, it's kind of fun. I mean, if you have the if you have the capability to do it and the connections to do it, Jude is so lucky to get to at least vicariously know Farva and Chowda, two great naval aviators, and if that sparks an interest in something that later on, he's able to pursue or not, he'll take that with him however his journey unfolds.
That's right.
Just like my kids, they've been influenced by other people, certainly not their father. But that's kind of the takeaway. The role models are there. You have to have your eyes open to opportunities. And that's really what's allowed me to do what I enjoy doing professionally and kind of parlay it into other areas.
So I know that we're not getting into details about your career because you're doing so many interesting things on, I don't want to say on the side, I would say in addition to, it's kind of a both and thing. I think one of the things that I hear people wrestle with is how it is that they either find purpose in the work that they're doing, or there are others who find purpose outside the work they're doing, or maybe there are people that are able to do both. How do you think about purpose either within the context of the work that employs you every day, or finding it outside of that work? Or is it a combination?
I think one begets the other. Yeah. I think the purpose you find in whatever you do, for a profession, opens doors to other possibilities, and allows you to use allows you to use your talents not only there, but outside, the workplace. In other endeavors, work can be multifaceted. I can fly airplanes, but sometimes I like doing consulting work, or sometimes I like get involved in, nonprofit work. And, they round out a person. You're not just a pilot. We hate to be pigeonholed, I think.
Yes, I would completely agree with that. I think of purpose lately, and I wonder how this resonates with you, but as this idea of Polaris being actually 3 different stars that actually vary in their brightness that make up the one North Star that we see, and that Polaris over time will no longer be the North Star. Obviously, we'll all be dead and gone, but over thousands of years, there are different North Stars as the Earth changes in its situation, and that seems to allow more flexibility for purpose than how people often talk about it. Does that resonate?
Well, I think that's a great analogy. I think, everybody has their North Star professionally, personally. You have to value that and recognize it. Well, you recognize it first, and then I think you value it later. And you get older, you value it more. But those stars change as people come in and out of your life. The only thing, as the French say, plus ça change, the only thing that's certain is change itself. So as your life, the arc of your life changes and proceeds, hopefully, different constellations are brighter and some dim.
Yes. I like that. I like that a lot.
No, but you set the table for it, like John, my friend, from college, his star was extinguished 35 years ago. But it still burns brightly in many of us. His brother, his mom, his high school friend, John Sheehan, his teammates from SEAL Team 4. We had 6 guys who served with John in the teams at the Kennedy Library the other night. And to see them react to how we as a group, as a community, want to honor their teammate is really wonderful.
That's just, what a gift.
And we're talking about 6 serious pipe hitters, okay? That term may not be familiar to most people, but I've become more familiar.
If you've been asking yourself, what's the point of all of this? Not just in your job, but in your life, you're not alone. Most high achievers I work with aren't lacking drive. They're lacking direction that actually matters. That's why I built Leading with Purpose at the Grit Institute. It's a step-by-step path to reconnect with what drives you, leads you, and sustains you, especially when things get hard. If you're tired of just checking boxes and you're ready to lead with intention, go to thegritinstitute.com/purpose/ and start Leading with Purpose today.
And not a product plug again, but I've learned by reading Ben Milligan's book, by meeting these guys, spending some time with them. Certainly not enough. It'd be great to have a guys' weekend and hear all their crazy stories.
I'm sure they have them.
Yeah, I think the statute of limitations might be over on some of them. But that's the star analogy is really good. The stars may dim, but they never go away. They're always part of the constellation that makes up your life.
Yes, absolutely. So if you look back across your career, and I know it's still going strong and you're still doing so many things, but what do you see in leadership that is consistent across military and civilian and nonprofit and pro bono work that you're doing even outside of that? What is consistent about leadership that resonates for you that people need to know?
Well, I'm no great philosophizer on leadership, but between reading your book, The Grit Factor, Stan McChrystal's book, Team of Teams, Emma McRaven's Make Your Bed, Simon Sinek, a lot of other people out there. Tony Kern's a great leader in aviation. He talks about flight discipline. So my first takeaway is showing up is 90% of the game. You show up, presentable, shoes shine, ready to work and ready to give, 100%. Yes, on any given day, none of us are going to give 100%. But if you're able to put that effort forth, I think it's recognized, it's valued, and hopefully validated. I can't speak for the last. I think a lot of our work is self-validated. I get the satisfaction of takeoffs equal landings. That's a good thing.
That is a good thing.
Right. And safely and efficiently and in the manner, whomever is employing me or, regulating our operation wants and needs and desires and expects. So, that 90% of it's just showing up. It's 90% perspiration, 10% inspiration. But in that 10%, that's where we find fulfillment, I think, in that 10% of inspiration. Wherever that is, if you can use that to the betterment of the whole, whether it's society, your community, your church, your alma mater, your work group, your family, then I think you'll find satisfaction.
And you have brought this up at the very beginning of this conversation and actually throughout as well, but it seems that you might think about purpose. I'm going to put the words in your mouth and you can take them out again if you like. But it seems to me that you're saying that purpose is really about something outside of yourself. It's not about you. It's about what it is that you contribute. Is that fair?
Well, I'm not a Jesuit educated person, but the Jesuits have a motto, a man, gender neutral, for others. And I think that's very, it's eternal. Whether you're a Thomas Aquinas or you're Pope Francis today, whether you're at a Jesuit school for education or a totally public university or high school, that message, which is present in your book, which is present in Ben Milligan's book about the NCDUs and the UDTs and the SEALs, which is present in Dave Powers' book about his hero, John F. Kennedy, who he worked for from 1946 to 1963, but he'd probably tell you, if he could, working for him wasn't really work. It was the honor of a lifetime. So when I read his book, and that's why we use the title of it, I used the title of it the other night when I'm waxing eloquently or not so eloquently at the Kennedy Museum. Johnny, we hardly knew you. Well, we did really know my friend John, and getting to know him better now is kind of enriches the journey, as we talked about.
Yes. Yes. That's wonderful. One of the things that I hear again and again in the both the veteran community as well as large companies that employ veterans is that it can often be difficult. And I know I experienced this, and I actually haven't heard your experience with this, so you'll have to share that maybe a little bit, of transitioning from the military into the civilian world, and particularly losing that sense of purpose, even if it wasn't fully yours that you developed, it was more one that was imposed. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with that transition and what you would recommend to others who are making that transition?
Well, I don't know if I ever really had a clear transition. I didn't serve all of my time in the Air Force on active duty. So, 6 of it's active duty. The rest is in the reserves, while I'm also practicing whatever I want to do in the real world, as we call it. So I don't know I ever really made a transition, probably till I retired. There's so many resources that are available now that I didn't even know were available. And there's so many people doing really great work at the corporate level, at the VSO level, in local communities. Even the services do so much better about providing resources as service members transition out of their service. I don't know if I didn't make a conscious transition. It just I retired and moved on to different stuff.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay.
But the same elements still stayed, and I think those elements are still there for you, for me, for a lot of veterans. We find purpose in helping our fellow veteran, our fellow man, our fellow community member, citizen. And if we continue to find that purpose, then there really is no transition.
Yes, but it's a helpful reminder for people who are struggling with that to know that service is not only in uniform. That's not the only place that you serve. It's just one of many places that you'll serve in your life. And it is important and it's powerful and it's meaningful, or it might have been, or it might be, but that you can have those kinds of opportunities to serve elsewhere, and that the world needs you to serve elsewhere too.
You just have to be willing to open to the opportunities.
Yes.
Willing, hey, a skill set I may not have had, but, you kind of learn along the way, and you learn as you go. And you leverage your network, your contacts, your time, talent, and treasure to help someone do something, for no gain, for yourself. I mean, really, people ask me my why about the statue project sometimes. I think I'll figure that out much later, as we've talked about, when the statue's done, when Joan is smiling, John's mom, and we all walk away, and we each answer that question for ourselves, just like, about our collective service in the military, whatever branch, even as a civilian. And I know that, the GS workforce is having a difficult couple months here. They serve too. They work for the greater good of the United States government, Department of Defense, or the federal government. So, we don't always figure out that, the why immediately, even after our service ends. I think that takes a vantage point of time.
Yes. Yes. And maybe there's just a recommendation for patience and to live into that, going back to your initial statement that it really is about that journey.
Yeah, the journey's not over. And what you take away from your service is what fuels the next part of that journey.
Yeah. This is a little bit out of left field for you, perhaps, but I think you'll manage it well. One of the things that is really important in talking about women in leadership, and obviously I'm not talking to one, but you are married to one, and you have a daughter as well, is
two daughters.
Two daughters. Sorry, two daughters. That's right. Is that that women in leadership right now are also going through a little bit of a challenging time, and it's really important to have allies. And you understand that. You have been an ally all along. Why is that? And how do you see that opportunity and maybe even that responsibility?
Well, it's definitely a responsibility to be an ally, but it goes back to the golden rule that someone I met a long time ago, a bright, shining North Star in my life, Tom Kessler. He said, if you follow the golden rule and you treat people like you want to be treated, you will have a positive outcome, whatever that positive outcome is. So, that it's a big tent. That's a big tent. And it's a big challenge too. Because we don't always find ourselves, being our best self. But when we're allies of our fellow man, whether it's you, Fifi Malakowski, Don Dunlop, Martha McSally, Jeannie Flynn, my teammates on the statute committee, Kara Dahlman and Karen Cientis, who are classmates of mine. When you are that ally, you're what we call a wingman. And, you're there for mutual support. Wingman is always there for mutual support. And whether you're lead or dash two on any given day, it's almost like an organic role hopefully for a lot of us. I really don't care your gender, your ethnic group, whatever, sexual orientation. Like Bill Belichick says, just do your job.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's all that most people want to do, right? That's what we want to do.
Right. And being denied to do that job seems really off-putting for me. I don't employ anybody in my consulting company, but if I did, all I ask for people is to, contribute and bring some to the fight. And then, as we all say on our little statute committee group, it's one team, one fight.
Yes. Yes. That's perfectly said. How do you define success at this point in your life?
Sometimes it's just getting out of bed and not being too sore in the morning. And that's kind of a flippant answer, but, success, it's not monetary. It's, maybe, well, for sure, watching your kids grow up and find their path in life, their bliss, whatever.
Yes.
It's supporting your friends, your family, your peers. Success, it shouldn't be defined by how much money you have in the bank or what your annual salary is. And I recently saw the value of that. And I shared this with you as, for our statue project, we have X number of thousands of dollars to raise. Had a classmate, generously pledge $100,000 towards our effort, which, you probably would find this hard to believe, but I was speechless. I mean, yeah. I'm having a conversation
believe, Tom.
on a phone, and somebody's offered to donate $100,000 as an anonymous donor. So
incredible.
Yeah, and so they're willing to share their treasure out of the goodness of their heart to honor a fellow classmate, but also that resonates with them. So I think they would be like-minded to the conversation we're having right now.
Yes.
That's what success means, sharing your time, talent, treasure with others. And I think, we've talked about that across the arc of this conversation. That's the journey.
That's perfectly said. And I think a wonderful, wonderful way to sum it all up. Thank you for all of your wisdom and your stories and your ideas. And you're a wonderful philosopher about all of this, Tom. That's what I appreciate among many things about you.
Well, stories, yes. Wisdom, maybe a little. But, if somebody watching this or listening to this, has one takeaway as they begin or are in the middle of or towards the end of their journey, that's why we're here.
Yes.
These stories don't live in a vacuum. These successes don't live in a vacuum. You certainly shared it, whether it's on a stage or with your book. And like, Mark has and Ben has and even Dave Powers has. And I'm hoping we can write a book about John. We have a title. We've already named the chapters. Maybe we have somebody to write it, but that would be good to tell the story so that sitting on a shelf in a library in Situate, Massachusetts, or, BC High or WPI, somebody pulls that book off a shelf and learns something about someone else and the impact they had on their community, both in the moment and then for a long time after.
It's wonderful. Where can people find more information about how to support what you're doing with John Connors?
Well, I'm glad you asked.
I bet you are.
we have a website, and maybe you can share it in the show notes.
Of course.
It's ameasureofaman.org. Or if you Google or search the John P. Connors Memorial Fund, hopefully it takes you to our website, and there's a button for donate. But the support we've received, like I mentioned earlier, from the communities of Scituate and Boston College High and WPI and the Naval Special Warfare community has been gratifying and really keeps it pours gas in our tank to finish the race and finish the mission and see that wonderful statue called Elise dedicated on Lawson Common in Scituate.
Well, and Tom, I love that you mentioned earlier that what you're doing is not only preserving this legacy and not only telling the stories and not only honoring your classmate, but also building a community around that. And that is building a community around something that is doing something bigger than all of us, which at the end of the day is maybe the second part of purpose.
I would agree with that.
If you have a moment, please make sure that you've subscribed, forward this to a friend, and drop in a review. It makes a big difference to the success of the show and helps others find it.